Alright, this is the EU LCS Fantasy Breakdown by WingPal on NA servers. This is a spreadsheet that I made and is available, and I will go ahead and link it in the description if you are interested. This has all the information and data that would be kept in order to base and figure out all fantasy things you could want. Anyway, moving on. We're going to go ahead and do a quick overlook at all the teams and players in specific. And yeah, that's what this is. And I will be showing you at the end of the video a tip on drafting and roster making. So here we got Alliance. Alliance did very well. They, as a team, as individually, they did as well. Froggen lived up to his expectation of being the #1 pick and having the highest CS averages. Topping out at 104.33 points this week. Not first place, but very well. He averaged 26 points a game, and it's very unlikely he'll consistently average that, but still, it shows that he lives up to the name, and I would expect him to keep doing so. Alliance is a great team, and picking up any of the Alliance players is very wise. I'll go into showing how important each player is later on. Copenhagen Wolves did not do very well at all. After seeing their performance in this last week, it would be unwise of you to start any player on Copenhagen Wolves for the next week, unless for some reason you wanted to put wewillfailer in at your flex position, but I'm willing to bet that there are better options for that flex position, and I would feel bad for you if wewillfailer was your last resort. Moving on to Millennium. They did extremely well, very surprising, just because of how competitive the EU LCS was at the end of last split and where everyone was. People were not expecting Millennium to skyrocket up to the top, and currently that's where they sit with Alliance and SK Gaming. But if we all know the EU LCS well enough, it'll flop around immediately. Well, possibly, but it's not impossible for that to happen. Anyway, with that said, based on last week's performance, picking up anyone from the Millennium team would be wise of you. All of them racked up extremely high amount of points for their position, and if you have them on your roster somewhere, feel free to put them in at starting position. Although, with that in mind, you must take into account that they are facing Alliance and SK Gaming next week, the other 3-1 teams, the other stronger teams. So if you have someone close to the expectations of what these Millennium players have now presented themselves with, feel free to throw them in instead of a Millennium player because of the high expectations and the hard teams they have to play this week. For instance, I am going to start MrRalleZ over Creaton because Super Hot Crew has an easier schedule this upcoming week. Moving on to Rockcat. Rockcat did not do as well as they were expected to do, especially after staying near the top of the EU LCS for a majority of the last spring split. I would not count them out yet, but based on last week's performance, I would not also start any of them. Very disappointed with Vander's performance. He did not do anything close to what was expected in my eyes, and I had started him on a lot of teams. Very disappointed. Overpow did decent for a mid laner in the scenarios that he was faced with, and is still good at a flex position if you were interested and you did not have any other better picks or opportunities for that position. Moving on, Super Hot Crew. Super Hot Crew did very well in terms of fantasy points, did alright as a team, and showed the true potential that is really hidden there. Super Hot Crew showed that they can throw hands with any of the best teams. And SELFiE and MrRalleZ, Mimer, Impaler, wewillfailer, all of them put up extremely high amount of fantasy points for this week. I would second think starting SELFiE next week because of his high amount of deaths. I believe he plays too aggressive at times and gets caught too much. So be sure to think twice before starting him. Look at all your options. We'll go into value of him later on. SK Gaming did very well. The only thing that I have to say is CandyPanda did not live up to the expectations of an 80 carry on a 3-1 team. I would expect him to do better in terms of fantasy points, but he did what he needed to win, and that's all that matters to them. To me, I'm not going to start CandyPanda over Rekkles or something like that, or maybe even MrRalleZ. MrRalleZ put up great performance, and they have an easy week next week. So super hot crew players, if you have them, feel free to start them. They should be playing pretty well next week, considering they're playing against easier teams. SK Gaming has quite a difficult schedule, but they are a great team, and feel free to start any of their players, including CandyPanda. I would not be surprised if he did better next week. Just based on his performance this week, I will have to see improvement first. Moving on to Fnatic, extreme disappointment. The only person that lived up to their expectation was Rekkles, who did extremely phenomenal. 22, 3, and 18 was his KDA. He got a quadra kill in that time, and all in all, just did very, very great. Soaz did not do so great, dying a lot of the time and not being there for his team when they needed him most. I feel bad for anyone who picked Soaz. He was the suggested best top lane pick for week 1. Feel free to bench everyone but Rekkles until we see improvement, unless you have faith. Gambit, once again, I feel bad for anyone who started Gambit. Heaven forbid you thought the teams that did well last season are going to do well this season. Gambit players should not be on the starting lineup of anyone's roster until they pick up their game. Extremely sloppy performance, and not impressed at all. Genja, by far, was putting up the best numbers on the team, and that's just simply because he wasn't dying 24/7. Alright, that's the EU LCS breakdown I've got for you. I will go ahead and show you how you should look at picking your roster specifically now. This is what I use, and I make sure to do this frequently. I'll go ahead and see if I can copy and paste this into the comments if anyone is interested in seeing it, like having hard copy of it. Alright, moving on. Hold on 1 second. Alright, there we go. Alright, here we have a notepad. This is what I like to do before I go into my roster changes and my drafts, because I find myself doing drafts almost every day, almost every couple hours, because it's enjoyable. Here we have the top lane. What we got here is the 4 best top laners in EU. This is all just EU. The 4 best top laner performances in EU. Kevin, Wickd, Freddy, Mimer, based on their points right here. It's pretty straightforward with them, basically, the ones with the highest points. Kevin is in a league of his own, though, right now, currently in the top lane. No one is coming near how well he's performing. It could have to do somewhat with how well his team's performing, but Alliance and SK are also 3-1, and they are a significant amount of points behind him. Would not be surprised if he held that lead in future weeks. Pick him up if you can. Start him if you can. Number 1 on priority for top lane in terms of EU players right now. Moving on to the jungle, we have Shook in a world of his own right now. Whether it's 5 points above KottenX, his performance was truly spectacular, and often making big plays to help his team win games. Definitely look to pick him up early. I always do. 3rd pick or 2nd pick. Oftentimes he doesn't last much farther in the draft phase. Moving on, KottenX did well. I'm hesitant in starting him because I'm not too sure how consistent he will be. But if you have him, he's a great player. He did really well first week, and I'd like to see him do it again in the future weeks. They just have a rough schedule next week. Super hot crew, Impaler, did very well, and I would like to pick him up if I were you. Oh, and just so you understand, this right here, 1, 2, 2, the 1 is basically what tier they are. Kevin is tier 1, and Wickd, Freddy, and Mimer are tier 2, essentially just stating that that Kevin is in a league of his own right now, and that he is top pick, top priority. Shook is top priority in terms of EU junglers. KottenX, Impaler, and Svenskeren are all comparable, and I would not be disappointed if I had to pick out of those 3 either one. Moving on to mid lane, Froggen is in a league of his own right now. Kerp put up extremely good performances and made big plays in week 1. But with that said, we have yet to know if he is consistent enough to keep these numbers going, because in his first game he only put up 14 points, which shows that he must have put up an extreme amount of points in his other games, which he did, but it could be hit or miss. Feel free to start him and not worry about it, but definitely in a tier below Froggen. Froggen is unstoppable right now, and I would love to see anyone else outperform him in terms of next week. If Kerp does extremely well next week, I would move him up to tier 1 with Froggen as well. SELFiE is tier 3 according to this right now that I set up, simply because he dies a lot. He's making unwise decisions, and these other mid laners are not in comparison. Whether he put up more points than Jesiz does not define whether he is a better pick overall. I would not be surprised if Jesiz put up higher numbers than him next week. Alright, moving on to 80 carries. Tabzz and Rekkles. My goodness. If you look at the way they've been performing, it is hard to find flaws in their play. Oftentimes dying maybe once or 0 times in their games. Not dying very much at all. Having correct positioning in fights, always being in the right place at the right time, racking up huge farm totals, and picking up kills when they can. These 280 carries I will not expect to perform badly this season. They seem to be extremely consistent, and I would definitely start them for the future weeks unless I saw worse performance. If you have either of these or both, props to you. Definitely put one of them in your flex position and one in the 80 carry position. High points are coming in the future. Here we have, below that we have MrRalleZ and Creaton and CandyPanda. The reason CandyPanda is on this list is because his points were significantly higher than the other 3 80 carries in the EU, and his team went 3-1. The biggest problem here is his points, his fantasy points, what his value is to us, fantasy league people. I would definitely look to play him, but
just keep in mind that he might not rack up these high totals like these other AD carries will, and he will often die for the sake of the team in the fights. Not necessarily for the sake of the team because of bad positioning. Anyway, moving on. Support. While nRated, wewillfailer, and Nyph all have extremely close scores, nRated seems to be on a different level. His support play has been extremely, extremely well, and I would definitely pick him over any other support at this current time. With that being said, the other three supports are also just as good, although Jree in specific did have an extremely poor game, which I was not expecting on his Thresh play. Jree in the past has managed to carry entire games with Thresh hooks into the blind and pulling the right person out at the right time. In one of his games, he did not manage to land any hooks that were significant at all. So, with that being said, wewillfailer, Nyph, and Jree all very comparable, and I would be just as happy to have any three of those on my starting support. Alright, well, you can go ahead and take this information into your drafts, into your roster changes, and feel free to let me know if this was informative and beneficial at all, or if I am just wasting my time. Alright, thanks. And I'll do this again for the NA in 3 days.